Well, good evening, everybody. If you weren't here with our mealtime, we're probably down a little bit in numbers tonight because our high school has gone to camp and our middle schoolers are having a pool party. So, but we'll make do, and we're glad you're here. So, I want to get started tonight with prayers. So, I have a couple. Of course, want to continue to pray for Julie and Everett, Israel. Julie has been moved to hospice, and so it's probably a matter of days now. And so, I want to continue to pray for them. And then, of course, the victims of the flooding in Texas, want to pray for them as well. Anything else we'll be praying for tonight? She is, it's a division of Waterman Hospital. It's kind of an assisted living, but it's like that wing that she's in deals only with like what she's dealing with. So it's a fairly large type of a facility. It's toward Mount Dora. So. Any others? All right, let's pray. God, we thank you for this evening and for this time together to continue to look at the life of Jesus and how he influenced people and interacted with them and spoke truth in a loving way, and how he's commissioned us to do the same. And I pray that you continue just to open our eyes to that tonight. We want to pray, continue to pray for the Israel family, for Julie and Everett, as Julie's been now moved to hospice, and it's likely a matter of days with her time left on earth. And so just continue to pray for her comfort and peace, for Everett as well, just to find the strength in this difficult time. And God, just grateful for her faithfulness to you and your faithfulness to us that gives us the hope of an eternity with you. God, we also want to pray for the victims of the flooding in Texas. So many are still missing, and so many found dead. And God, just pray that you would comfort those families and just use this tragedy to turn people's hearts toward you. God, we want to continue to pray for our world at large as well, particularly with the conflict in the Middle East, and just pray for continued your will to continue to be done in all ways, but especially with to see peace prevail and evil toppled, and to see your name praised and people come to a knowledge of who Jesus is. For our military and our missionaries as well, we pray the same for their protection and effectiveness, and just grateful for the sacrifices that are made by our military and by those who leave so much here to go and tell others about you. And God, we just pray tonight for our time together, that we would just continue to, as we said, see how Jesus calls us to live as he did. And we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so kind of just a little bit of a fun icebreaker here as we talk a little bit about what it means to be salt of the earth. What is a food that you refuse to eat without salt or some kind of seasoning? Watermelon. So we were just talking about that. So how many of you put salt on watermelon? Or, how many are no salt watermelon people? All right, I'm surprised. I don't like it either way, so minority on that. But, all right, what else? What are the fried oysters? Okay, I don't think I eat that with or without salt. Ketchup. Eggs? Yeah, eggs and seasoning. I'm a popcorn guy. You can't have unsalted popcorn. That's no good. But I think popcorn is kind of just an excuse for us to eat butter and salt, really. So that's kind of its primary purpose. But any others? Any other weird ones? Steak, yeah, I can see that, yeah.
French fries.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. All right, well, we'll get to just this... We'll open this question because it'll be the theme of our video. But Jesus makes a comparison between how we treat people and the salt on food. What does it look like, or maybe you've heard the phrase, they're a salt of the earth person. What does it look like when believers are salt of the earth?
Humble.
Humble? Okay.
They walk the walk and talk the talk.
Helpful.
Okay.
Just good people.
Okay. Yeah, you hear that a lot of, we watch a lot of crime shows in my house. So usually when somebody dies, the family will say, they're just a good, salt-of-the-earth kind of person. And it's like that mentality of a good person.
Good witness.
Okay? All right. Well, none of those are wrong answers, but we'll look at a little bit of what that looks like, and not just the role of salt, but how that portrays to us in our video tonight. So we kind of have two passages tonight, Matthew 5:13 and Matthew 5:41, two ideas that kind of go toward the same direction. So we'll spend some time discussing that after our video and what it looks like to be salt of the earth and to have this idea of what it means to go the extra mile.
In our study together, we have looked at a number of examples where Jesus goes out of his way for just one person. He takes a perilous boat ride at night to meet a dangerous man who's locked up in a graveyard. He goes out of his way in the heat of the day to connect with a Samaritan woman at a well. And throughout the Gospels, we just find one example after another of stories like these. And oftentimes, what we find is that the very people Jesus went out of his way for are the same people that we tend to go out of our way to avoid. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus preaches a sermon known as the Sermon on the Mount. And there's a section of the sermon where Jesus gives a teaching that helps us understand just how he was incredibly intentional to do what he did, to show God's love to people one at a time. And I'll just tell you up front that what he teaches is pretty uncomfortable because his teaching contradicts the way that we naturally think. His teaching will challenge your innate perspective, and it will certainly challenge our cultural understanding of how we think of ourselves and how we treat others. So towards the beginning of the message, Jesus talks to his followers about their identity. And he says to them in Matthew chapter 5, he says, "You are the salt of the earth and the light of the world." And then what he does is he teaches his followers to treat people in a way that shines a light, to treat people in a way that adds some salt. Now, in those days, salt served a number of purposes. It was used to preserve food, but it was also used, as we would commonly use it today, to add flavor. And I think we could probably all agree on the fact that there are some things that just aren't any good without salt, right? Like a baked potato or corn on the cob. No offense, but if I sat down to eat with you and you eat your corn on the cob without salt, I'm out. Like, I don't trust you as a person. But the point of what Jesus is saying is that when we treat people in a way that he does, it adds salt. But when we don't treat people this way, it's like corn on the cob without salt. Nobody's interested in it. And if we could apply his one-at-a-time approach to the way we treat the people in our lives, Jesus says it will make God look good, and people will notice when we do it, and it will give people an appetite for him. To set up how Jesus applies this teaching, I want you to think about how you typically deal with difficult people. Now, you might have someone who immediately comes to your mind, a name, a face, but let me help you a little bit here. Maybe it is the bully at school, or a rude coworker, or an annoying neighbor, or an ungrateful child, or a selfish friend. But how do you respond when someone hurts you, or betrays you, rejects you, ridicules you, takes advantage of you, gossips about you? And Jesus begins this teaching by saying, "You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth." Yeah, I've heard that, and I kind of like it, right? This idea that you hit me, I'll hit you back, and you yell at me, I'll yell back. I'm not gonna raise my voice, but if you raise your voice, I'm gonna raise my voice back. You honk at me, I'll honk back. Like, before your honk is even done honking, I've already started to honk. I'm comfortable with that approach, this eye for an eye approach to life. But Jesus begins by saying, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye. And then he gives a new standard. He says, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. Jesus had a way of challenging people by making a broad statement like that. Don't resist an evil person. But then he gets specific in a way that makes everyone more uncomfortable. And after saying, don't resist an evil person, he gives 4 different scenarios to help paint a picture of what that looks like. What I want to do is draw your attention to just one of the scenarios that Jesus gives. Jesus says, if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Okay, so here's the problem I have with this. It's the word forces. Honestly, if someone asks me, respectfully and kindly to go 1 mile, okay, I'll do that. I don't really feel like it, maybe, but chances are I still need to get my steps in for the day, so I'll go with you 1 mile if you ask me. But the minute I feel forced and my pride kicks in, I get sensitive and angry because force implies that someone is trying to control me. This teaching is in reference to a law back then that a Roman soldier could force civilians into acts of service, but there were limitations. So, as an example, a Roman soldier could force a Jew to carry his pack for 1 mile, but not any further. The Jewish person didn't have an option about carrying it 1 mile, but he didn't have to carry it any further than that. They couldn't be forced to go the 2nd mile. So, just for context here, the Roman soldiers were the enemy and they treated the Jewish people like dogs. Can we just imagine a scenario? A Jewish man is coming home from work. He's tired and he's hungry and he just wants to get home for a little bit of sports center before going to bed. And he sees a soldier on the side of the road. It's the last thing he needs. The soldier throws his pack onto the ground in front of the man's feet, says something like, "Be a good dog and carry this for me." Now the Jewish man is angry. He's upset every step of the way. And as soon as he hits the mile mark, he drops the pack and he marches home. What happens when he gets home? Well, he's frustrated and he's angry and he slams the door and he yells at his wife. He's short with the kids. He kicks the dogs and he spends the rest of the evening in his home. But what if he got to the end of the 1st mile and said to the Roman soldier, "Hey, you know what? I don't mind going a 2nd mile if it would help you out." It might feel like he's giving up power, but if you think about it, isn't he taking some control back? Because no one's making him do it, he's choosing it. He might have come home a little later than he planned, but he walks in the door with some dignity. My guess is the Roman soldier wouldn't have known what to say in that moment. I'm sure he would have told his other soldier buddies about it, like, "You wouldn't believe what happened to me today. I made this Jew carry my pack 1 mile, and he voluntarily carried it too." The point is, people would have noticed. A few years ago, I was visiting with a member of our church who owns a local business. There had recently been an incident where a young man came into a store and stole something that was worth a couple $100. The owner was, of course, upset and angry when he realized what had happened. And when he reviewed the security cameras, he was able to get a license plate number, and soon he had a name, and we'll call him Jake. And he called the police with Jake's name and picture, and the police took a report. But what happened next was really up to, in large part, the store owner. He considered his options. I mean, he could take the eye for an eye approach. He could make Jake pay for what he had done. Jake was facing like a $1,000 fine and a year in jail. But the store owner decided he didn't want to ruin this young man's life, so he considered the second option. After Jake returned the item, he could just sit him down and yell at him and take out his anger. That's honestly what he wanted to do. That's what felt right. But the store owner was a follower of Jesus, and he decided on option number 3. And so he took time to pray for Jake and ask God what he should do. And that night he left Jake a message and asked him to come by the store. And Jake came and apologized. And the store owner told Jake, "I forgive you. I care about you. I won't press charges. The only thing I'm going to ask is for you to come to church with me." And Jake agreed, and he came to our church the next weekend, and our church was able to help Jake get connected to an inpatient treatment center for his addiction, where he started that path down the road to recovery. And sometime later, Jake's sister stopped by the store and introduced herself to the store owner, and she told the store owner that she and her husband would often come to our church and had often invited Jake and their parents, but they'd never shown any interest. But recently, they had all started coming together. Now, what changed? The store owner put some salt on it. Now, I get it. Like, what he did doesn't appeal to our sense of justice. What he did feels unnatural. What he did was certainly unnecessary. But he set aside his rights, he humbled himself, and he went the extra mile. And Jesus teaches his followers to have this extra mile mentality with one person at a time. Even when that person is the person who is an enemy making your life miserable. Well, what would it look like to do that for you today? I would just encourage you to try it. If someone insults you, say something nice to them. If your spouse criticizes you, compliment them. If someone blames you, bless them. If your server is short with you, give a more generous tip than you would normally give. If the boss is especially grumpy or demanding, pray for her and drop a note of encouragement. You don't think they'd notice that? They would notice. Go the second mile. Listen, it'll bless your life. It will make a difference in this world, and you will make God look good.
All right, so two kind of images that work in tandem, this idea of being salt and impacting people that way and then going the extra mile. Both of them involve, kind of doing things that are not convenient for us. And we've talked about this a number of times. And Tina, last time we met, talked about how these kind of each week builds on another, that we have to work in us before He works through us, and we have impact around us. But these things are both, particularly going the extra mile. This is not just a convenient thing to do. This is markedly inconvenient. And so this is, I think, it's a little bit more difficult because so far we've talked about opportunities that are readily available. We meet till we at an intersection, or we create these intersection moments, or we create these moments where we meet people that are down and out and are kind of marginalized in different ways. This is a little bit different because it pertains to how we interact with people who we might consider enemies, or at least antagonistic with us. And so I don't know what that means for you as far as who that person might be. I think sometimes we hear enemies and think, well, I'm not a superhero, I don't have a nemesis or anything, but we do have difficult people in our lives. And so I want to kind of think through that. I'm going to kind of split us in our groups that we've been doing. There's not as much to read this time, so we'll have a little bit more time for discussion than reading large passages. So I'm actually going to read these verses to start, so that we can spend more time discussing in groups than reading. But these two statements, both from Matthew 5, Jesus says, "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot." This idea that Jesus is talking about, we talked about, and when we did our Sermon on the Mount series not too long ago, about how salt is a relatively stable compound, but it's more of a polluted nature. It's salt that isn't really fully chemically salt, that is leaching and losing its saltiness. And so there's an idea that there's a genuineness aspect of this. Are we really truly followers, or are we allowing ourselves to be polluted? And then in Matthew chapter 5, verse 41 is the extra mile passage. He says, "If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you." So with those two passages in mind, we'll split into our groups here a little bit. If you want to get up and move around, you can, just to form a group of, 5 to 10 people, discuss for a little bit, and then we'll come back together before we end and talk about this just a little bit more. All right, I'm going to go ahead and bring us back together. I'm sorry if we didn't get through all the questions. That's okay, though. Just to kind of wrap up with a few final thoughts. So I heard some of you, as you're talking, say, well, how does salt lose its saltiness? I never had salt lose its saltiness. So it's kind of a unique situation for Jesus' time, because the way they gathered salt would be actually from the Dead Sea. And so they would gather it up. But you'd also collect what's called gypsum, which is this kind of white powder with it. So as you stored that, in different places, what would eventually happen is if it got wet, the salt would actually leach out of that into the ground, which would leave behind this gypsum. And so it was flavorless. It was useless. It didn't flavor, it didn't preserve, it didn't do any of that. And so really this is talking about what we've talked about this whole time, this idea of impact. If salt loses its impact, if it loses its ability to flavor, if it loses its ability to preserve, then it's not good for anything. You can't even, salt your sidewalks with it or anything. It's useless. And so I think this idea of, if we lose our impact for Jesus in whatever way that might look like, that can be a willful thing where we just don't want to have an impact, or it can be just a matter of, rebellion or ignorance or whatever that might be, that we have a mandate to have an impact for him. That's why we are the church. That's why we've been left to carry on the ministry that he started. So that I just wanted to kind of answer that as to why that happened, because I heard a couple things out there with that. But also, this final question to kind of wrap some of this up. What sometimes prevents us from wanting to go the extra mile?
Pride.
Pride, okay. Huh?
Cost us some money.
Status, money, cost us.
Lazy.
Okay, laziness.
Fear. Time.
I thought about the time aspect of this, because if you take, literally, the average walking mile is about 20 minutes, and that's walking at a pretty decent pace. But so you got to think about 20 minutes, and then another 20 minutes, and that really puts you at a 4-mile round trip, because you're going to want to go back to where you started. So you're looking at literally 80 minutes of time if we're talking a literal example. But also, in addition to that, you're carrying, I actually looked it up while you guys were talking, how much a soldier's pack weighed. And it said an average between 60 and 100 pounds. So you're carrying 60 to 100 pounds of extra weight for 80 or for at least half of that time. I don't walk 2 miles regardless of carrying anything. So that's obviously a literal example, but we can kind of extrapolate that into other things. It's time consuming. It's hard. It's we're doing this for somebody that we don't like. It's not like a favor that we're helping out a buddy move. It's something you constricted into this service. So, I think a lot of that all plays into that. So, I also wanted to hear just if you had any examples of this one. Have you ever had someone go the extra mile for you? What did that look like? Because obviously this is beyond just going an extra mile. This is a metaphor for other things, that people doing things beyond what they needed to do.
Yeah, we did. Traveling across country, we were moving from Hawaii to the East Coast pretty much, and driving across South Dakota. It was flat as it could be, and we ended up with a car problem, and we were able to make it to a 4 corners where there was a motel, restaurant, garage, and something else. So we put the Ann and the kids in the motel, and then went over to this garage, and there was this little old guy over there, and I explained it to him, and he said, I'll work on it and I'll let you know in the morning. He stayed up all night, and the next morning I went over there, and here's my car all over the floor. And come to find out, long story short, it was a wheel bearing, so he had to put it all back together again. But while we were there, we were moving, and so we were anxious to get to Ann's parents' house, and so we were about 50 miles south of Pierre, if anybody knows where that is, in South Dakota. And these guys at the gas station met me, kind of just through discussion. No one else was there. And they said, don't worry about it. They said, we'll pick up in the morning. They took me 50 miles so I could get an airline ticket and fly on to Minneapolis. And they said, call me when you're ready to come back. I flew back. They drove up and picked me up and brought me back so I could pick up my car, and they refused to take any money. And that was really salty.
How long ago was that?
68.
Okay, so you know what, we're talking a lot about this because of how disarming this kind of idea is to an enemy at least. But you know, that shows you how impactful that was. That happened all those years ago, and you still remember what it did for you. And I think that is a lot of what Jesus is getting to. Is I heard a couple of you mention the Chosen. I haven't seen this particular scene, but how disarming it was for the Roman soldiers in that scene to have somebody go that extra mile. How that was just beyond their comprehension and caught them off guard. And so I think that's really what this is about, is you're showing somebody love and care and attention or effort that really doesn't deserve it. Not saying you weren't deserving, but you know what I mean? In this sense of, you know, he can't have the example of, you know, tipping somebody who really wasn't that great at service or whatever it might be. And so there are other examples of this. Anybody else have an example of somebody with the extra
Remember
mile?
our car burned up?
Yes.
It's been 4 years already. So we went camping up in Georgia, and we, right over the line, we came back into Florida with our car. So our camper was still up in Georgia. 20 miles back down to New Island, State Park, our car burned up. They're yelling, pull over, your car's on fire, get up, burned up. Well, it was a couple, married couple, they were a Christian couple, because we talked later. They actually volunteered, they were volunteers at State Park, took us 20 miles back to our camp. Same deal, they would not take money, but we shoved like a $20 bill in our so the same deal, we didn't know them, they took us 20 miles up, 20 miles back, and took us to the campground. So,
And those people were strangers.
Yeah.
So it's not only just people that are enemies or foes, but it's a stranger, because, you know, it says in the Bible, you know, to treat strangers as such, because you could be entertaining an angel, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's always just putting others above yourself. Like Christ has said, you think of yourself less. And that's where pride is, right? We have to think of ourselves less and be selfless. And I think that kind of, you know, catapults us into doing these things more if we think of it that way.
Well, that kind of goes to our final thought for this evening. Just really to look for, I love the phrasing that they had as a question. We see the power of the extra mile mentality to gain the attention of someone who might otherwise ignore the call of Jesus. And that's really the heart behind the story of the young man Jake that he shared. You know, they'd been trying to get Jake and his family to go to church for a while, but it wasn't until an enemy, or at least somebody who had an opportunity to become an enemy, really showed him that compassion and that love that caught his attention for Jesus. And so I didn't or that idea of who might otherwise ignore the call of Jesus, and how I don't know, that caught me in a certain way to think about how we might be that one person that other people might have been trying to influence, and about our act of kindness, our act of service, act of love might be the thing that kind of tips them over the edge into investigating more about what Jesus is like. And so just to echo this prayer, I encourage you to pray this week or something along these lines. Jesus, remove my pride when the moment hits, so I can go the extra mile when it counts. May I be the salt of the earth in the low moments when with the people who need it the most. And so, again, as with every week, I think the biggest thing is just praying for opportunities, for the eyes to see the opportunities, and to encourage you to do that this week. Just looking with how we might go a little bit further, or do something more than is required to help somebody. Dave.
But also, you know, Jesus said, "Give a cup of cold water in my name." It's not just the giving of the cup of cold water. It's not just doing something good. It has to in some way bring glory to Christ. If it's gonna impact like what Jesus is talking about here. It's not just a good deed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I thought it was funny with the young man Jake that he said, I'm not going to press charges unless you come to church with me. That would be a weird. If you're in Jake's shoes, like that's okay, like it's really. But there was that extra call. He didn't just let him off. He went further to invite him into a relationship with Jesus. So yes, thank you for.
I was just just thinking about the things that we have to do to go the extra mile, and I was thinking about the man who carried the cross for Jesus. I mean, he didn't probably want to do that. He was thrown into doing it. And then imagine what that was like after he saw Jesus crucified. What did it do to him at that point? I just think that's like, whew, blown away. But that's what he asks us to do every day, to deny ourselves, pick up our cross, and follow him.
And I think so often when we do this, you'll have that, why did you do that for me? And that, really this is an avenue to opening up to conversation. Well, why did you, because I'm a follower of Jesus, and, it gives you the opportunity to talk about your faith. And it's opening that door to have those conversations about, sharing, the love of Jesus. That beyond just, I want to be nice to you. No, it's because I follow Jesus, what he calls me to do. And he loves you as well, and those kind of conversations. So, thanks for bringing that up, David. I appreciate that time. So, all right, well, that's all I got for tonight. Unless somebody else has any other questions or comments, but we'll see you on Sunday.